Earlier, I spoke with Michelle Snyder, the managing director of Market Gauge Group, to discuss the latest report on the economy. Take a look. So, Michelle, while 8.3% inflation is better than 8.5%, it's still not good. What do you think? Are you surprised?
No, I'm not surprised. And the biggest increase actually was in food prices, which is something that is troubling, obviously, because it's something that we absolutely cannot live without. Number one. Number two is a lot of it is induced by all of the weather conditions that we've had that have been so severe throughout the globe. Drought, floods, supply chain, of course, doesn't help to that, but really it's been Mother Nature on a tear, and we have a long winter coming, so it'll be interesting to see what happens there. So these crops, they don't have enough time to actually regenerate to supplant the food shortages that we already have. So yeah, this is not a surprise, and particularly not a surprise where the food prices are concerned.
Yeah, well, inflation rose, 0.1% from July. It's still 5 times higher than when Biden took office, though. So let's give you a look at we'll give you a look at a chart in just a moment. But first, let's talk about the core inflation. That's inflation once you take out food and energy prices. So that's up 6.3% from a year ago. This number rose for the first time in 5 months. What does this mean?
Well, even though it does exclude food and energy, I don't think that the Federal Reserve is completely ignoring the core inflation, and that was obviously the biggest concern that we saw today. So what it probably means, and there's rumors floating around right now, is that the 75 basis points that the Federal Reserve was planning on and the market was expecting to rise come September 21st may actually go to 1 point. So really, it's going to be a question of, this is a fast rate of change, obviously, with the interest rates, and that's an impact, a negative impact, number one. And number two is, what really I think is going to be the meat of that is, besides the obvious destruction of so many areas of the market and the housing market, et cetera, which of course people are going to say is going to lead to a guaranteed recession, is can it really ultimately control some of these areas like food and energy that have parameters beyond just interest rate sensitivity, like Mother Nature and obviously geopolitics.
Wow, that's aggressive. So you think the Feds will raise it by 1% instead of the 0.75 that we have seen in the past?
Well, that is actually not necessarily my opinion, but I just saw Nomura, and it's definitely not confirmed, looking at that possibility. And of course, it is possible.
Yeah. Okay, so let's look at the inflation timeline since Biden took office. It was about 2% when he became president. Then after the American Rescue Plan was passed, it shows inflation went up to 8.5%. That's the 40-year high. And then Putin invaded Ukraine, and we saw it go up to 9%. Now, the president is celebrating more spending for the so-called Inflation Reduction Act today, while Americans are still suffering from high costs. Doesn't this seem a little tone deaf?
Well, I really try not to really get into the blame game, because my job is to help people really navigate the scenario and where to do their money and put their money. And clearly, obviously, government spending is questionable at this time. At the same time, we've had really very little economic growth. And of course, the Fed monetary policy, I think, is going to be maybe even more influential, because what's going to happen is, in the face of government spending, if we have any chance of limping along in sort of a stagnating economy, and by the way, there's expectations that GDP will actually go up in this next quarter, which would be relatively positive, the Fed could really put the kibosh eventually on any type of growth and put us into a recession. And there'll be no government spending your way out of that. It will have to just sort of take its course as we try to bring down inflation by other means. And I'd say that's probably my best comment on that, because this is a culmination of a perfect storm of a lot of different things. And yes, do I think it exacerbates with more spending? Absolutely.
All right, and the Feds are slated to raise interest rates. We'll see what happens in just a few days. Michelle Snyder, Managing Director of Market Gauge Group, thanks for your time today.